Captain, enemy ships decloaking off our port bow.
They're charging weapons.
Shields up. Red alert.
They're firing!
Containment failure detected. Warp core breach imminent.
Welcome to Warp Core Breach, Episode 5. On this episode, David and special guest host Natasha do a unique top 10. Griffin survives an ambush at Cestus III. The Faction Report examines the Thunderchild and how it changes Federation tactics. Nick's Intermix returns to explore an interesting combination. Steven continues discussing multiplayer play. And we all commiserate about bad critical hit draws.
Warning. Warp core breach detected.
I'm David Montgomery, and here's my co-host, the Deanna Troy to my Will Riker.
Oh boy.
That's Natasha. Alright guys, welcome to episode 5. We've got Natasha with us because Nick is on assignment. But don't worry, he'll be back next week. What's new with you in the Star Trek Attack Wing world?
Well, not too much. We are going to do a tournament on Saturday.
That would be QOP3.
Yeah, we're going to do the QOP3 tournament on Saturday. I still have not made my build, but that's okay. And you've been sharing with me about the new ships that are coming out, which all sound exciting.
I know you're excited for Bioship Beta.
I am, but only if it looks cool.
It's a bioship. It's going to be the same model. How can it not look cool?
Well, that's true. That's about it for me. What's going on with you?
Well, the shipyard's staying busy. I just released a video, kind of a fun video celebrating 150 subscribers about why I play Star Trek Attack Wing. So if you haven't checked that out, take a look. But this week, I'm going to be all about Ferengi. I'm going to look at the Creighton prize ship from Dominion OP1 and the Kreecha retail release from, I think it's wave 15, might be 16. I'm not sure. They all tend to blend together. But yeah, this week is all about the Ferengi.
Well, it's about time.
So, the other thing that happened is I finally got wave 17 releases. How much did you roll your eyes when I came back to the game table carrying multiple Star Trek ships?
Well, that's pretty par for the course for you. I did roll my eyes a bit, but your collection wouldn't be complete without all of the new ships. Did you get a chance to open them and look at them yet?
I have indeed. The cards have been photographed. The ships have been sorted. Nacelle work has been completed on the Tong.
Oh boy.
Well, that's because the nacelles were on backwards, and you cannot have a ship flying in reverse.
Says who?
Says every Federation, every Starfleet manual in existence, says every spacefaring civilization on Star Trek.
Boy.
Do you people see what I have to put up with on a day-to-day basis?
Do you people see what I have to put up with on a day-to-day basis?
Alright, I think we should move on to our special event before this gets any worse. So, Natasha, what did you want to talk about? Since you're the co-host, you've got free reign of things.
Well, you know, David, I usually do our segment called Dude, It's Just a Game, which I'm not doing this week. The reason I do that segment is because I am what could be described as a casual player. I'm not super competitive. So I thought it would be really fun to do a top 10 list, because I love top 10 lists, and I think we should call it the top 10 frustrations of being a casual player at a tournament.
You know, folks, she says she's not all that competitive, but she has won a couple of OPs, and she does tend to go, 2-1, or 1-2 at the worst. So it's not like she loses all of the time.
Well, maybe that's my main frustration, is that I want to be competitive, but you guys are just better at doing it.
Well, on that note, let's get to the top 10.
Okay, number 10. Losing because you don't memorize the rulebook and the FAQ. So this is something that happens to me a lot. I'll lose because I misunderstood a rule or a scoring mechanism, particularly in the OPs. And that tends to be extremely frustrating over what I consider to be a technicality, but you competitive freaks consider to be the game.
Like not raising your shields at the end of the round after you fired while cloaked?
Okay, we're not going to talk about that, David, okay? It was an honest mistake. Everybody makes that mistake. Also, I didn't know. Yeah, that's one example of many where I misunderstood either a rule or a ruling that was made later or some strange scoring mechanism, and it either lost me the round or lost me the entire tournament just because of what I was like, it doesn't matter that much, but it ended up being pretty significant.
Yeah, that is the case. But I think every single one of us, hosts, co-hosts, contributors, and listeners, have had an error like that, and that may be a question of the week in the future. So, we'll get there.
Okay. Number 9. Losing to the new guy. And by new guy, I'm air quoting that. You can't see me, but I am. So there have been a few times where someone has just showed up to a tournament and been like, hey, I'll play. Or put a build together on the fly because they forgot. And they've completely decimated my very well thought out build. Or maybe not so well thought out, but I play all the time and I usually build my fleet somewhat ahead of time. But, some random person can just come in and kill me, and it's sad.
That is frustrating. But I've had a couple of times where I've lost to those people too, so you're by no means alone in those situations. But I can certainly understand that it's more frustrating for you as the casual, semi-competitive player who has put time into things going, oh, a new guy, maybe that'll be a fun match, maybe we'll enjoy it, and then they're like, nope, I'm out for blood, and I gotcha.
Indeed. Number 8. Now, this is something that we haven't actually dealt with in a while, but we're going to soon. Building blind boosters on the fly. Being a casual player, usually my ship builds, I'm able to sit down and think them out, talk them out, get your opinion, figure out what cards work, what cards don't. On a blind, I don't have that luxury because, well, you're building your own blind and we only have a few minutes, and so I have to throw together what looks good in 30 points or less, and my blinds tend to be my least useful ships, mainly because I'm not as well versed in all of the little minutia and what really works with what, and so blind boosters tend to throw me.
Well, and Nick and I have talked about trying to make judicious use of your blind boosters, and it's tough. There's a lot out there of how to really maximize just a small amount of points, and they're never the key to your build, but yes, I can understand that quick fleet building. You're up against the clock, you've got a few options. It is a tricky thing for new players and for more casual players. And you came in and you started building blind boosters from day one. That's not the way to learn the game.
Right, and at that point, you were trying to teach me the game, so you made my entire build for me the first 2 tournaments, but I had to put together my own blind booster, and I think it was mostly what card looks the prettiest was my whole strategy there. But I've learned a little since then.
Yeah, I think your next set of blind boosters will be better.
Yeah. Okay, number 7. I'm going to simply call this one overkill. You competitive players tend to sometimes use a little more force than necessary. We'll call it excessive use of force. So there have been times when I'm in a game and I'm down to 1 life and there's absolutely no reason to roll a ton of dice with thousands of modifiers and play out every step of the modification even though I'm super, super dead. So that's a situation where I'm calling it overkill.
There's no reason to fire transphasics at the Romulan scout vessel.
Right. Or at a ship that's taken a lot of damage already and is almost dead. But certain people, David, tend to take great pleasure in not just killing my ships, but making sure that there's not even any debris left in space.
Well, I'm making it easier for people to fly through space later.
Yeah. Moving on. Speaking of situations unique to you, David, number 6 is losing because you agreed to playtest. Now, I will say that at this point we don't agree on how this particular situation played out, but more than once you've said, hey, you've made this build for the tournament, let's play test it against each other. That way we'll know how our builds work. And I very blindly and stupidly agreed, sure. And then when you figured out what was wrong with your fleet, and particularly what worked about mine, you went and changed yours, and then completely creamed me at the tournament, where if I had just left the build alone, I might have actually won.
So this happened in Collective 3, when players were destroying the Borg cube and then the Borg sphere. And we put our builds together, and I realized that mine was just a little bit off, and I needed a little more punch, so I made a slight change, and I had a little bit more punch in my build.
Slight change? Didn't you add Picard? Pretty sure that's what happened.
That was a slight change.
Uh-huh.
There was another instance where I completely reworked a build because she had an amazing combo, and then I decimated her.
Uh-huh. So you specifically tailored your modifications to defeat my build. As much as you want to deny that, it's true.
No, I saw something that you did that worked really well, and I did it better.
Mm-hmm. So on this one, we've agreed to disagree just because we don't want to break up over it. However, I'm going to open up the forum to the listeners, and if you agree with me, which you should, go ahead and feel free to pop that on the Facebook page and tell him he was wrong for that. So wrong. Anyways, moving on. Number 5. Realizing you're the only one in the room who just built your fleet last night.
Or this morning.
Yeah, well, you know. Now, I talked about people who run in and do that sometimes, but most of the time at a tournament, everybody there has been thinking out their build for weeks, has modified it 4 times, and is thinking about making changes before they commit it to a list. And me, I just was like, I need 3 ships there, put some upgrades on there, alright, cool, and that's enough for me. So that is kind of a frustration when I realize that I'm the only one who is being super casual about my build, and everybody else is treating it like it's the Declaration of Independence or something.
Write, edit, revise, test. Edit, revise, test, you know.
Okay, it's not an essay. It is a Star Trek build.
But there's things that are worth revising.
Mm-hmm. Again, casual versus competitive.
Sometimes things just don't work.
Mm-hmm. Number 4. Getting lost in the minutia. So with this, sometimes, aka a lot of times, at a tournament, you or someone else will start talking about some ship or expansion or OP event coming up, and you start talking about all the different ways that it's good and bad, and I'm like, the Borg are cool. So, sometimes I feel like I have nothing to contribute, or I have no idea what you're talking about, and so I just stand there and look like a dummy. That's really frustrating for me. Number 3, remembering my opponent's build. So, this happens with people who have multiple ships with multiple upgrades that all do different things, and particularly combos. So, magnetometric guided charges come to mind. Letting myself get within range of those ever. Or certain combinations that make firing at a ship pointless because I'm not going to make any hits anyway. So when my opponent has a ton of stuff going on, I tend to have a really hard time remembering what they have going on while also remembering what I'm supposed to be doing in my build, plus maneuvering and who to fire at. And I tend to get lost, and that's where a lot of my losses in tournaments happen, is when I'm not focusing, when I'm not concentrating on what my opponent has brought to the table.
It is a tricky thing, even for experienced players. Those combos are the key to a lot of things, and that's where I think bringing some kind of disruption can really help you, because then you can throw a wrench in someone's plans, and now they're scrambling because they can't do what they want to do.
Yes, but you're much better at that than I am.
Well,
that brings me actually right to number 2, which is never getting to play for fun and win. So one thing that, being a casual player, sometimes I just like to make a build that's goofy or funny or is all Ferengi or,
Tholians.
2 super ships. So, well, I mean, you can't do that anymore, but you used to be able to. Things that are fun and interesting, and I just want to put upgrades on there just because I think they're cool, but I know I can't win a tournament by doing that. I can't even win a match in a tournament by doing that, and that takes away the fun of the build. So it's like I can't ever just be like, oh, I just want to make this cool, funny thing and win, but I can't ever do that. So that tends to be a big frustration of mine.
Yeah, that's where mission play comes in, and maybe that's something we need to do more of if we're going to play more games, but...
Oh, please. As if you would let me play a mission with just a fun build and not completely decimate me.
I'd let you build both sides of the mission.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure you would.
Or I'd build both sides and I'd let you pick, or I'd build my side, you'd build your side, and I'd let you pick which side you wanted to play.
I think if we did that, I would go to my standby, which is telling you that you can only play Ferengi or Kazon.
I'll take Kazon every day, thank you.
Okay. And now, the number 1 frustration. Sorry, being dramatic. Opponents who have to get every last point. So, you're infamous for this, as are several of the other people we play with. You can't just let me lose with a little bit of dignity. Just be like, oh, you lost. I could completely wipe out your last little 25-point ship. Or I could just win and call it a good game. And you don't. You have to cause severe crying and wipe the table. That's typically your pattern.
You have never cried at a Star Trek tournament. Don't be dramatic.
Though there was that one time. But anyway, I get that you want to win, but there's winning, and then there's winning. And you tend to not consider it winning if you haven't completely obliterated my entire build and my hopes and dreams. I would say that would be my number 1 frustration, is just be like, oh, okay, you lost, I won. Good game. See you next month.
Well, that would be hard. We're each other's rides.
You know what I mean. It's not just you anyway, it's the other people too. They do the same thing, and they just have to make sure that I'm really, really dead.
Well, and that's the problem with a lot of the missions, is that you're playing them to maximize your points. It's not just, hey, beat your opponent and call it a day. It's play and get every single point.
I do believe I've specifically asked you if we could just call it a win, and you wouldn't let me.
Well, that's on WizKids. There's no rules for a forfeit.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm serious. There are not rules for what to do in a forfeit.
I'm not saying forfeit. I'm just saying call the game before time. Like, it's okay. You won. I lost.
Let's go have a sandwich?
Yes. Or ice cream. Anyways, so, yeah. So that's my top 10 frustrations. Maybe if Nick goes out on assignment again, I can do my top 10 awesome things about Star Trek, because I don't hate the game. I do really enjoy playing. I really enjoy making builds, and I don't enjoy playtesting, but I enjoy everything else about the game, and I will definitely continue to play.
Yes, so take all of this with that grain of salt. This is not somebody bashing the game, and I don't even think you're bashing competitive players.
Other than you, no.
Well, that's okay. You're allowed to give me all the grief in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's not about hating competitive people or not wanting to play with them. It's just realizing that as a casual player, there are limitations to what I can do, and that being frustrating for me. But I still totally respect people who have the time and energy to be a competitive player and memorize the cards in alphabetical order and know the rules, be able to quote the rules on command. I'm just not one of those players. I mean, in essence, that's my top 10 list. I'm really glad to have gotten to co-host with you this week. I want to do it again. Definitely want to know if any of the listeners out there agree with me, or you, mostly me. So definitely feel free to jump on the Facebook page, tell me I'm right. Mention your own frustrations, things that you've come across, or maybe solutions to my frustrations. Anything you want to say, we're more than happy to hear and respond to and all of that.
And that's facebook.com/warpcorebreachpodcast. All one word.
Yeah, and don't forget to tune in next week where I'll be back with Dude, It's Just a Game. Thanks everyone for listening, and definitely hope to see you around. And remember, it's just a game.
And next up, we've got our contributors.
Coming up, the Faction Report examines the Thunderchild and how it changes Federation tactics. But first, Griffin regales us with his harrowing escape from the ambush at Cestus III.
Hi, this is Dave Griffin. Today we're going to discuss the Ambush at Cestus III mission. This is a classic from the original show. It came with the Sigorn, the Gorn Raider, and it reenacts the Arena episode. The forces are 45 points on each side. Gorn, in other words, independent, versus Federation. The Gorn can have one and only one Gorn Raider entering on the southern standard entrance area for the map. The Federation has one Federation ship with exactly 2 crew upgrades on the top of the planet, which is 4 inches from the southern end of the map. So you have the southern end of the map, you have the planet right at the edge of that, and then you have the Federation ship right on top of the planet, probably going right or left. Now, depending on who's got the highest captain skill, the Federation ship might have to place before the Gorn. If they do, the Gorn can come up behind them, which is a pretty good strategy for them. Special rules: the Federation captain and both its crew upgrades start out on the planet on an away team. So place 3 mission tokens on the planet to denote that, and if you've got away team markers, put those on the Federation captain and the crew upgrades. Now there's a formula here, basically 1 plus the number of tokens the Federation ship tries to beam off for attack dice, and 4 minus the number of tokens for defense die. And what that means is if the Federation uses its new special action, for which it does not have to drop its shields, it nearly states how many of the crew it's trying to beam up from the planet. Then you go through the formula, the attacker rolls the number of attack dice he can, and the defender rolls the number of defense die. Both of those are unmodified, and any number of attacks over defenses prevent that many of the crew from being beamed aboard the Federation ship. So the Gorn can slow down the beam outs, but not a lot. So it is possible to get all your crew off on 1 turn if you're lucky and your opponent isn't. But on average, it takes about 2 turns to do. Now the objectives are where this gets complicated. For the Federation player, they need to destroy the Gorn ship, but only after they have their crew back. They can't destroy the ship beforehand, or it doesn't say what happens, but I'm guessing it's a draw since neither side attained their victory objectives. For the Gorn, it has 2 options. It can either destroy the Federation ship before the Federation ship has its crew upgrades, or it can escape off the north end of the map. Of course, there's an additional option there that's sort of implicit. If the Gorn ship destroys the Federation ship after it gets its crew upgrade, it could then turn toward the north end of the map and escape, even though there was nothing to escape from. So the Gorn have lots of ways to win this, and the Federation really has only one. Now, one note here, the Quantum Slipstream upgrade, which is an independent upgrade, is actually an auto win for the Gorn. If you think about it, it would allow them to take a couple of shots at the Federation. If they lose, they could Quantum Slipstream right to the north edge of the map and leave. So even though the scenario does not say this, I would suggest that this upgrade be disallowed. So as the Federation player, you want to survive what will probably be a couple of shots from the Gorn initially while you're beaming your people off. If the Gorn has captain skill on you, you probably are not even going to get a chance to fire back. But at the end of those 2 turns, you probably should try to be turned to face north, which probably means extra movement. Admiral Forrest or the Indy-Fed fleet captain or both. Now there's a wide variety of ways the Gorn can play this mission. They can either try and destroy the Federation ship, in which case the Federation ship needs a better defense, or they can be just trying to escape, in which case they'll have movement upgrades. They'll take a couple of shots at the Feds, and then they'll hightail it for the north end of the map. So the Federation has to be ready for all of those possibilities. For the Feds, the Type 8 phaser arrays are good if they have a ship that will take it, like the Constitution or the Constitution refit. Spock and Voltaine are a good combination if the Gorn have the monotanium armor, which is in their faction, because you can't do target locks in that case. And Picard maneuver is a possibility for trying to catch up if they head for the north end of the map. For the Gorn, improved deflector screens is a great thing to take for them, and Seslak wouldn't be a bad captain, except that it really would be nice to have the captain skill on the Feds, so Carr might be a better choice, and Dalby gives you some auto repair if you need it. But I think captain skill is very important here. Well, this upgrade, this mission has a lot of possibilities, a lot of way to win. So have some fun with this and take some time on your build. I would rate this probably 3.5 stars. I think it loses a little bit for the fact that it's so easy to win or lose this thing quickly. It's not the sort of mission that tends to last an ordinary amount of time. If one player plays it right and the other player doesn't, the mission can end very quickly. Good luck with this.
Good evening, and welcome to the Faction Report, the segment that brings you the inside scoop on all the factions. We'll show you how they really work, expose their weaknesses, find innovative combinations, and help you make them work better. And now here's your host, the man who is not Picard, David Walton.
Federation are the faction that has it all, and the Thunderchild expansion was going to struggle to add something nice to the Federation. So rather than go through upgrade by upgrade for the Thunderchild, what I thought I'd do is look at a way that you could use some of the upgrades from the Thunderchild expansion to make a fleet that the Federation perhaps haven't been able to do, or have only been able to do not as well as they could have done, better. And that's the Torpedo Swarm. It's a fleet that I've wanted to do for a long time. Torpedoes are so iconic in the Star Trek universe that I always wanted to use photon torpedoes and quantum torpedoes, and the cost of doing so meant that at most one of my ships would have them. But the Thunderchild has a couple of things in the expansion that really help to make a Torpedo Swarm a viable build. The first thing that they add is the Federation Task Force Elite Talent. This is brilliant. It's basically the same as Kira from the Bajoran faction that allows you to take a target lock and all of the other ships in your fleet to acquire a target lock at the same time. That's brilliant if you're running torpedoes because it really reduces the action cost that the rest of your fleet has to pay. Added to that, the time token torpedoes that come with the Thunderchild expansion and the rapid reload upgrade, which is a disable to basically not put any time tokens down because you get rid of one at the end of the turn anyway, means that you could run a whole heap of ships with the quantum torpedoes or photon torpedoes from this expansion with rapid reloads because it's not unique, and just have a barrage of torpedoes flying out of your ships. I thought about running this on Reliant class ships because they've got the great forward coverage and they've got the rear arc as well, and then running the quantum torpedoes from this upgrade with all of the ships in the fleet, and I'm running 4 of them, with the rapid reload expansion. Some captains to help out. Spock, Picard 9 both would help here. And then Admiral Hayes from this expansion. It gives you an extra attack dice. So you're rolling 6 attack dice on all of those ships with a free target lock thanks to the Federation Task Force upgrade to get the free target lock. And then the rapid reload to make sure that your torpedoes are ready to use again the next turn. Meaning you can do 2 turns of 6 dice quantum torpedoes just to blow your opponent out of the water. So if you like torpedoes, this is a great expansion for you. It's got quite a lot to offer, the swarm builds. There's a little bit in there to counter the permacloak fleets. The only disappointing card, really, is the ship itself. You would have hoped that a ship so heavily focused on bringing torpedoes to the game would be a bit of a better torpedo boat than it is. It's only got a 90-degree front arc, and when you're running torpedoes, there are much better options for the Federation faction for getting the big front arc and the rear arc that the Thunderchild doesn't have. What the Thunderchild does do, though, is it runs interference quite well. The ship's perk and the elite talent that comes with it, which is called Intercept, are quite good for making sure that your opponent doesn't necessarily get the target off on the ship he would have liked. It helps to interfere with their plans. It's pretty good from that point of view. It works quite well with Cerna Kohlrami from the Sakharov expansion to allow you to really mess with your opponent's game plan. I think the ship itself probably works best as a gunboat, not necessarily with torpedoes, but it's got a good manoeuvre radar and 4 primary weapon value, which means you can use it potentially with some big hitting ships as a good support secondary antagonizer. So it's a good expansion overall. I think there's a lot in there that will allow Federation players to expand their fleets and give them more options for what to do. And that's the last of the Wave 17 expansions to look at. Probably not for the most interesting of factions. Federation can basically do anything. So it's interesting that they managed to find a few things to actually upgrade that faction. Thanks very much for listening. I'm not Picard.
Coming up, Steven offers some multiplayer alternatives to traditional OP play.
Hello again, everybody. This is Steven Van Deventer, manager at Da Vinci's DreamWorks 2 in Jensen Beach, Florida. I'm going to talk to you again this week about more multiplayer. One of the things that I get asked when I'm talking about multiplayer is, what do I do about the board setup when I have so many players? Well, if I have about 7 or less, sometimes 8, and I'm doing my one-ship builds, they can be on a 3x3. I either make sure they're separated nicely along the edges of the map, and there might be some sporadic terrain in the way, obstacles, planets, or I can have planets kind of populated in the center, and I have them all in the center with their backs like within range 1 of the planets. So they're not even facing each other, and they circle around and loop through the planets to try to get each other. If they're doing like a 2-ship build, or maybe it's a full build, or I have a lot of players, I will put usually 2 3x3 playing areas together. When I do this, though, the players are often still separated, even though there's a lot of them or a lot more ships, so I want to use the wormhole tokens. These came with the Dominion War OP. I do not remember which one, but it's a giant Bajoran wormhole token. I want to say it was OP1. What I do is I make a little rule where players can go into one and exit out another. That way they can traverse to the other half of the table and instantly get into more fighting. Or if I'm making it to where players get destroyed but they come back, I can have them start in these Bajoran wormholes, and that way they can get right back into the action. This makes it much more smooth and fun for the players. Sometimes for deployment zones, if we do teams, either the players will pick their own partners or I will pair them together. And if player of greater skill, I give them a more standard deployment zone, and I'll give some of the newer players like a wider deployment zone, especially if it's a multiplayer. That way they have more room to maneuver their ships in case they make mistakes, because you want them to actually get a handle of the game and not just get creamed by the veteran players right away, and the veteran players enjoy the challenge. We did one called Neutral Zones, where we have a planet in the actual neutral zone, and the deployment areas kind of cut off the whole area. And inside the actual deployment zones, which is your space, we have the orbital platforms. They're also from a Dominion War event, 4 or 5, and we'll put those in the zones, and they will automatically attack players at Captain Skill 1 at the lowest initiative, so they attack dead last no matter what, any player that does not belong in that starting zone. And then I'll award players, if they're on teams, LEs based upon actually defeating ships, the red shirt team, and to the team that controls the actual planet or whatever we put in the center that is up for dispute amongst the players. They like this a lot. When I do teams, I do give both players something. So usually they have an LE and a blind booster to split, or it'll be 2 blind boosters, or a ship off the wall, something of that sorts. But what I got coming up is one of my variations of the OP events. We just completed our first year hell. I'll probably be doing another one at the end of the month. But in the middle, I like to do our multiplayer variations. So here's the format for the one that I'm doing Wednesday, which this is probably already playing as that pass, so you'll see pictures of it in the Star Trek community. But the build is 1 ship at 80 points. A player may use any resource except for fighters. You can use retired ones, and of course your ship can't be fighters or a shuttle. Each ship will be affected by a random condition. Now I have not yet decided as of recording this how I'm going to divvy out these conditions, or if it's going to be every turn or what. I do not know, but they could get continuous effect tokens that have 3 time tokens ticking down, which will have their shields disabled, Possibly their primary attack value will be decreased by half, rounded down, minimum 1. Their agility could be reduced to 0. The ship cannot take actions. Some of the other random things could be all upgrades gain 2 time tokens. Your captain and admiral start disabled with 2 time tokens. Your ship would gain 3 time tokens, meaning it can't use its ability until the time tokens are expired. Your resource can get removed from play. These are all random effects that I'm going to have divvied out. Also, all ships will start the game with 1 critical damage except for warp core breach and 1 ox token. If you guys have ever played Are You a Werewolf, I have incorporated that for this game. One of the players randomly will be the actual time ship, and the other players will not know. This player will know once the event starts. And basically, what will happen is, at the start of the playing phase, I'll have all players close their eyes, and I'll have the time player point out a player or show me a number, and that'll be that player. That player will get 1 time token on all of his upgrades at the start of the planning phase. So, to prizes, I'll give an LE to the player who actually finds the time ship player and defeats him. I'll give an LE to the player who actually earns red shirt, and I'll give an LE to the time ship player if he can defeat 3 or more ships. And so that's what we'll intend to do. So I'll talk about it next week and tell you what happened, and you'll probably see pictures of it, but look forward to that, and I'll talk to you next week.
Welcome to this, the second edition of Nick's Intermix, where we look at the different interactions between the cards of Star Trek Attack Wing to see which ones fizzle, which ones sizzle, which ones are stable, and which ones are volatile. In the chamber this week, we have a Romulan weapon that has seen a fair bit of use, and an underused elite talent. Now let's inject these 2 into the core and see what happens. This is Nick's Intermix. There's a lot of players out there that love the Romulan faction, but still don't feel that they're a fully, truly competitive faction. Well, I've got some news for you. I'm dredging up the old all-forward Disruptor Banks and Disruptor Pulse combo, which many of you may not even know of, and adding a little bit extra spice to it so we can get that much more out of your Romulans. So let's begin with explaining how the initial combo works. Your Disruptor Pulse is a range 1 to 2, attack 3 secondary weapon that comes from the Hakona. It states, attack. Disable this card to perform this attack. During the declare target step, target every enemy ship that is in your forward firing arc and within range, that's 1 to 2, and perform a separate attack against each of the target ships with this attack. Not bad for a 5-point secondary weapon. Add on the elite talent, all forward Disruptor Banks from the Valdor. It's a 4-point elite talent, and it says, action. Disable this card to add 1 attack die to any attack in your forward firing arc this round. Now, this one you can actually add to each of those attacks. So that means you've bumped it from 3 up to 4 dice against each target. Want more? Well, we can throw the obligatory Denatra on a friendly ship, throw Mendak on with her so you can get battle stations to go on to this. And what shall we do for Captain? Well, there's a few options. The simplest of which would be Salatrell, gives you the elite talent slot, 3 points, 5 captain skill, and it allows you to shoot with a captain skill of 10 whenever you have a ship of the chosen faction in your forward arc. So you don't have to have all 3 of those be the same faction, only one of them has to be the selected faction for you to have the skill of 10 for the entire round. While she's handy in this situation, she's certainly not the best choice. Well, let's step up to Toreth. She's a 4-point captain with 7 skill and an elite talent. Her ability says when attacking, you may convert 1 hit result into 1 crit result. Now, you may be thinking, because of the may, you only get to do this once. But with the prefix of when attacking, you get to do that each time. So for each of those target ships you're performing a separate attack, you get to convert 1 hit into a crit for each one. If you're not happy with that, we can try going it 1 step further with the 5 captain skill Valdor, who costs 3, and what he says is when attacking, if your ship is not in the target ship's forward firing arc, add an attack die. So that says target ship, which means if you're targeting multiple ships, you get to use that ability each time. So that can bump your Disruptor Pulse up to 6 attack dice against each target. Assuming, of course, that you indeed are not in the target ship's forward firing arc. Now, If you're shooting against a Borg ship with a 360, it does not have a forward firing arc, so it doesn't matter which way they're facing, you get that bonus. Now, I remember when I said that one of your friendly ships would have Natasha and Mendak on it. Well, if you also have the ability to play flagships in your venue where they're not retired, we have two amazing options here. One of which is the independent side of the Klingon flagship, and it states, all other friendly ships within range 1 of your flagship gain 1 attack die when attacking at range 2 to 3. So that means with Disruptor Pulse, you have to be within range 2 to get both benefits. So you would now be firing 7 dice at every ship at range 2. The second flagship option is the Romulan Flagship itself, and it states, when attacking, all other friendly Romulan ships within range 1 to 2 of your flagship, so this guy we're hoping, would choose any number of their attack dice and re-roll them once. So you get a free target lock effect. Isn't that something? So at this point, with this flagship on it, you're rolling 6 dice against each ship, and you can re-roll them for each attack. Even though it says may on the flagship card, it is prefaced with when attacking. So each time you are attacking a new target, you get to benefit from this one time. Now, as recording this, I actually came up with another resource idea. If you throw on the Romulan pilot, after you move, you may discard this card to place a scan token beside your ship as a free action. If you do so, you may immediately make an additional green maneuver. Now, that scan token will come in really handy if you decide to go for the officer cards and choose the science officer. One of the abilities on it, it adds a tech upgrade slot to your upgrade bar, which is always valuable for Romulans. But its next ability is each time you attack, if there is a scan token beside your ship, the defender rolls -2 defense dice instead of -1. And, based on the rules in the rule book, only upgrades are limited to trigger off of tokens once per round. This is not an upgrade, so therefore it doesn't count. So you may use that benefit of that scan token for each attack. So each attack against a target ship, that target ship rolls -2 defense against your attack of now 6 or possibly 7 attack dice. And given that you're not limited to just one officer card, you can choose up to the total of the 4 of them. Say you've only got 1 crew, so you're limited to 2, so let's choose the operations officer. It also adds a crew slot. So you could add another crew and add on the first officer and tactical officer cards. But before we get too ahead of ourselves here, the ability on the operations officer says, during the modify attack dice step of the combat phase, you may choose one of your attack dice and re-roll that die twice. So for each one of those attacks, because it's a new modify attack dice step each time, you can re-roll 1 die twice for each of those separate attacks that you're getting from that disruptor pulse. So further meat to your firing. Now, that Romulan pilot was a discard and placed a scan token beside your ship as a free action. So, if we go with a first officer, you can also get a second scan token on your ship at the cost of an auxiliary power token, and that will allow you to then reduce your defense of the target by 3 instead of 2. Now, you don't get to double up and go -4. The science officer only checks to see if a scan token is there, reducing from 1 to 2, but that second scan token will add an additional -1 for a total of -3 defense dice to each of your targets. Now you might be wondering, why not throw the 4th tactical officer card on there? It does add a weapon slot and allows you to add extra attack die or defense die by spending a battle station token. While that is an option, it does cost you another 3 points, and it will in effect cost you your battle station token before you get to convert, so you'll lose the ability to modify your dice for quality. So it's probably best that you leave the tactical officer card out unless you're desperate for that 1 extra weapon slot, which, in most cases with the Romulan ships, you're not too hard up. This has been another edition of Nick's Intermix, bringing cards together since tomorrow.
Alright, we're back. And it's time for the top 3 of the week. So this week's top 3 is the worst crit to draw when you take a critical hit straight to your hull. So Natasha, what's your number 3?
My number 3 worst crit is Jostled Navigator. This one is specifically bad for me. I know a lot of people don't consider it that big of a deal, but for me, I tend to have some issues with maneuvering, especially when the ships get all real close and tight, or I forget about initiative and which order ships move in. So I actually do tend to crash into things a lot. Jostled Navigator is a really bad crit for me to pull because it means that I'm taking damage when I maneuver bad. So it's like insult to injury. So that's why that's on my top 3.
That is a very good pick.
What's your number 3, David?
My number 3 is Injured Captain.
Oh yeah, that's a good one too.
And this is one of those cards that is specific to my play style. I love my captain text. I love taking elite talents. And whenever I see this one, I have a feeling of dread. Basically, I consider the ship that gets that crit to be a write-off. Maybe it gets one more shot in, but I'm doing everything I can from this point to let that ship be the one that dies and to save everything else in my fleet.
No, I could definitely understand that. I don't tend to run a ton of elite talents or really cool captains, so that's why it didn't make my top 3, but when I do, that's definitely a frustrating crit.
Indeed. So, Natasha, what is your number 2?
My number 2 is Direct Hit. This one's rough because you basically you have to take 2 damage for the cost of 1. And sometimes, aka a lot of times, that can mean the difference between living or dying. There's been a couple of times I've pulled the crit, been like, be Warp Core Breach, be Jostled Navigator, be anything, except Direct Hit, because that puts the final nail in the coffin and kills me off before I can at least fire one more round. So that's definitely my second worst crit.
Yeah, especially when time's been called, you're in that last damage roll, and you take 1 crit, you've got 2 hull left, and it's, alright, I lived. I win this game on anything but a direct hit, and it's a direct hit.
Yeah. So what's your number 2, David?
My number 2 is also direct hit. So basically all the reasons that you gave are the reasons that direct hit is a really bad crit to draw. It's double damage. So at this point you're probably asking yourself, well, double damage, that seems pretty bad. What could possibly be worse than that? Natasha and I both agree on this.
So my number 1 and your number 1, Stunned Helmsman. It sounds really harmless. It says the next time you fire, roll no dice, don't attack. The next time you attack, roll no dice, don't attack, and flip this card face down. So it's a one-time effect. And the first time I saw it, I thought, oh, that's harmless. But the problem is, it's not just don't attack next round, because you could just maneuver to where you can attack, sit out a turn, come back, and kill them. But it's the next time that you're going to attack. So you have to be in firing range. You have to have someone in your sights. And you have to declare an attack and then not attack. And that can be extremely detrimental to your game, especially since by putting someone in your firing arc, you're probably in theirs. And so you're losing the ability to do any damage to them. And they potentially have the ability to do damage to you.
Yeah, and it's important to note that this will cause you to lose your cloak token if you're a Klingon or Romulan ship. It messes with you in all senses of the word. You're just in a bad place no matter what happens when you get this crit.
No, of course, it is my number 1, but there are situations where it's not that bad. If it's towards the end of the game and you weren't going to get another chance to fire anyway, no big deal. You know, if it's on a ship that you weren't using for heavy firepower anyway, like it was just there to take damage or to help with whatever. If it's not one of your heavy firepower ships, it doesn't have to be the most horrible thing ever, but a large majority of the time when I pull this crit, it means a very detrimental effect to my game.
Agreed. It is not an every day, this is the one crit I hate seeing. It is more often than not, this is the crit I don't want to see. So those are our worst crits. We pretty much agree. Now, let's toss it around the comnets and see what our contributors have to say.
This is Steven Vandeventer again, and my least favorite crit to draw is definitely direct hit. I've seen it happen to so many of my players, and it's definitely happened to me. I see the damage rolled, and I'm like, oh, I can take that. I'll probably live with like 1 and be okay. Then the crit gets revealed, and it's direct hit, and my ship is just instantly gone. It's like, why couldn't it be Warp Core Breach? At least I would get to shoot this turn. But yeah, direct hit. Worst one I hate seeing when I get it. It just wrecks everything. And that's it for this week, guys. Bye.
Innkeeper here from the Wandering Inn, and the least favorite critical hit draw is going to be the Stunned Helmsman. That one drives me nuts, simply because you spend a couple of turns trying to align your ship up to open fire, and then the enemy sneaks a critical hit on it, you get that card, and then you can't shoot when you make an attack. And then you can flip the card face down. That means you spent the last couple of turns trying to align your ship, you take 1 critical hit, and you can't fire anything for that round, leaving the next round probably an open opportunity for your opponent to hit you yet again. So that's my choice. Stunned Helmsman, worst critical hit draw ever.
Greetings, Warp Core Breach listeners. This is Bane of Borg. This segment, the least favorite critical hit that I like to draw, I'm going to be like everybody else and say Warp Core Breach is my least favorite critical hit. By far, it's the worst one. But let's take it one step further. The next one of my least favorite critical hits is direct hit. Suffer 1 additional damage, then flip this card face down. This cost me a ship in the recent OP event, and actually cost one of my opponents his ship in a recent OP event. So I'd have to say it's probably the second worst critical hit you can draw. But going back, yes, Warp Core Breach, critical hit, my least favorite one to draw. Thanks for listening. This is Bane of Borg signing off.
Hey there, all my fellow Commodores. This is Will Holsclaw. What's my least favorite damage card to draw when I'm hit with a critical? Well, with all due respect to this podcast title, it's not a Warp Core Breach. No, the one that I really fear is Stunned Helmsman. Usually when I've gotten a critical hit on my ship, it's near the end of the game, at least for that ship it is. Every shot counts at that moment. The Stunned Helmsman, which simply says, the next time you attack, do not roll any attack dice. I really need that attack, probably. When I don't get it, that's really going to spoil my day. A lot of times this will happen even when I have equal captain skill to my opponent's ship. If they've just destroyed me, I've now been deprived of my simultaneous fire. As a runner-up, I'll also say that I'm not too fond of Injured Captain, which says that you cannot use your captain's text or any of your elite talent upgrades. I can tell you this has really ruined my day on a number of occasions, particularly on the old days when I used to run James T. Kirk from the Teeny Prize a lot. All too often I'd have 2 cheat deaths under there, and if I get that Injured Captain, I can't use either of them. It is a real bad day for me. Thanks a lot. This is Will Holsclaw, and those are my least favorite critical damage effects.
Hi, this is Dave Wharton from the Faction Report. My least favourite crit to draw is Stunned Helmsman. So often in the game, being able to fire before your opponent is such an important thing. I always run captains with the highest skill as possible, and drawing Stunned Helmsman as a crit is just devastating. It means that your opponent gets an extra opportunity to attack you before you've had an opportunity to shoot at them, and often this can mean that you don't get to kill them, so they get to fire back and kill you before you get a chance. There are other crit cards that are pretty devastating, but it is Stunned Helmsman which I think makes the most difference in games. I can think of at least 3 games off the top of my head where having a Stunned Helmsman result has changed the result of the game. Firing at a diamond and then seeing that one crit that sneaks through shields turning into a Stunned Helmsman, it's fantastic. It's fantastic news for you. If your opponent draws it, it's terrible news for you if you draw it. So I'd say Stunned Helmsman, that's the crit that I least like to draw.
Hi, this is Dave Griffin. My least favorite critical is direct hit. I know that doesn't seem usual. Everyone hates Warp Core Breach and Stunned Helmsman. But if I had to show what card has actually killed me in games more, it would be direct hit. You're hanging by a thread, you've got 1 hole left, and you're pulling your cards, and one of them is a direct hit. That's the extra thing that kills you, and you're dead. So that would be my choice, direct hit.
Thank you again to everyone for listening. I want to give a big thank you to Natasha for filling in for Nick on short notice. And yes, even though there was a lot of criticism there, I know how to take my lumps. So, don't worry guys, everything's good. At the end of the day, yes, it is just a game, and we're having fun. So, it is two completely different perspectives on things. And it's important to have that.
10,
So, I will steal
9,
Natasha's catchphrase
8,
and say that
7,
until next time,
6,
remember that, dude,
5,
it's just a game.
4,
This is Nick.
3,
And this is David.
2,
Ejecting the
1.
core.
Warp core ejected.
Warp Core Breach is produced by Nick Norris and David Montgomery, with additional content from our contributors. Our computer is voiced by Corinne Donnelly. We are neither affiliated nor associated with WizKids Games or CBS Paramount. All sound files are used under Creative Commons 3.0 by attribution. For specifics, please visit our Facebook page by searching Warp Core Breach Podcast. If you want to contribute to the show, let us know on the Facebook page, or you can email us at warpcorebreachpodcast@gmail.com.
I feel like I should start quoting captains in alphabetical order.
I feel like you could.
I feel like I can't.
I feel like you're trying in your head right now and you need to stop.
Aladar Jarok, Alpha Herogen, Anorax, Arturus, Benjamin Maxwell, Benjamin Sisko, Beverly Crusher, Bioship Alpha Pilot, Black, Bach, Borg Queen.
You have a list in front of you, don't you?
Yes. Bractor, Calvin Hudson.
Okay, stop.
Centurion, Chakotay.
David,